humans are designed to live. We're always trying to find ways to live and survive. And the capacity to be able to take one's own life actually suggests an incredible amount of strength and bravery.
The Black community continues to face a serious mental health crisis, and it's led to an alarming increase of our young people dying by suicide. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, in 2019, suicide was the second leading cause of death for Black Americans ages 15 to 24. But despite the needs for professional help, only 1 in 3 Black adults who need mental health care receive it. On the season finale of Girl, We Need to Talk, psychologist and the author of the best-selling book, The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health, Dr. Rheeda Walker shares the steps we can take together and individually to create a healthier community. My father died on June 20th, 2018. I was 37 years old, and suddenly everything I knew about myself was uprooted. I had so many questions, and there were so many layers to peel back. Who was my daddy? And who am I as a result? What was his legacy? And what will mine be? My mantra for 2019 was happy, healthy, whole. I was determined to face my grief and heal. And my girls were there with me every single step of the way. I found strength in my vulnerability, and we had open, honest, transparent conversations. And that's what we're gonna do here in this space. So grab your journal, light some candles, pour a glass of wine, and get cozy. Because girl, we need to talk. Thank you for joining us. I'm Charity Bailey. Dr. Rheeda Walker, thank you so much for being a part of this series. What you add to the conversation is priceless.
Thank you so much, Charity. It's good to be here.
So let's hop right in. You say that the Black community is in a psychological crisis. What factors do you think play into that?
Well, I will say what has alerted me to the crisis is the suicide death rate for young people, including children age 5 to 11. And what it has suggested to me is that a number of factors have all colluded into this emerging shift in our society, wherein racism has been here for a while. So racism isn't new. Generations of racial violence and racial tension have existed for far too long. And also, we've had untreated depression and untreated anxiety and all sorts of mental health disturbance that have kind of flown below the radar. But I think what's happened in more recent times is that the protective covering that we've had through a positive racial identity, a positive sense of what it means to be a Black person, that because we've lost a lot of that, we've become more vulnerable to the racial stress and also to, the untreated mental health challenges that I mentioned just a moment ago.
Well, you mentioned racism, so let's just head straight there because it plays a major role in our lives as a Black folk, right? The bank, riding your bike, trying to work out, going to the store. It feels like it's everywhere, so much so that sometimes it feels like we can't catch a break. So how do we protect our mental health while we're dealing with the everyday stresses that everybody else goes through, and then you add being Black on top of it?
I think it starts with awareness, because we don't actively talk about the impact of not just racism or overt racism, but racial microaggressions. We don't talk about and we don't understand the impact of all of that on our psyche, on our emotional well-being. But instead, we're having to fight through it and deal with it and adjust to it, sometimes to our detriment, without understanding the impact of it. And unfortunately, it seems like it's like breathing air, the degree to which racism impacts our day-to-day lives.
Now, you decided to become a psychologist, and you've recently taken a front row seat, in the push for mental health, and especially after writing your book. What have you seen happening as a result?
I have appreciated all of the opportunities that have emerged to talk about mental health and to start to shift the awareness and to shift, I think, motivation to be able to address these challenges directly. I think it's still moving at a glacial pace, but again, folks are being more aware and are more willing to address these conversations. So I can appreciate that shift that I have seen since the book came out.
Well, the shift is happening. We're becoming more aware as a generation, as a culture. But what do? We raise awareness, we talk about it, but what's the action behind it? How do we fix it?
Well, to be honest, I think that part of the awareness makes us more resilient. Just by being aware, as an example, that every time I leave home and make some adjustment because of racism, like maybe I carry the small bag in the store because I don't want anybody to think I'm stealing stuff, or maybe for individuals who relax their hair or wear wigs because they don't want nobody talking about natural hair, like all of these little adjustments that we make, that when we start to recognize, oh, wait a minute, I'm doing that not because that's what I want or that's authentically who I am. I'm making the adjustment because of racism. And that awareness in and of itself, I think, can be empowering because it can suggest that we stop making those adjustments,
Yeah.
that we stop saying that I'm going to acquiesce to racism, I'm going to resist racial violence or white supremacy or all these things, that I'm going to resist. And I do think that that act of resilience is incredibly empowering and also increases our psychological well-being because we start to take control over the narrative rather than the narrative controlling us.
Well, I think that's so much of it, right? I feel like no other group has to justify their existence, has to justify the way their curls flow naturally out of their hair, the way they speak or laugh or don't speak or laugh or show up. And I'm tired. And then I listened. My mom told me once uh, that when she in the 70s, she's like, we couldn't wear our natural hair, but the white women could wear their curly perms. My hair naturally grew out of my head this way, and I took a pick and picked it out in the morning, and suddenly I'm being political. But like, what? This is who I am. It's not a political statement, people. And that's like, I think nowadays we're just like, we're tired. You do you, and I'm gonna do me. And if me being me bothers you, then good for you. At least that's my take on it. I'm doing my job if I bother you.
And good luck with that. That's the thing, is that, we've had to shift out of being our authentic self. And
Mhm.
we've heard everybody from Fannie Lou Hamer and everybody else say, I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I would suggest that that fatigue, the enormity of that fatigue speaks to our mental and emotional health, that you can't be
Yeah.
that tired all the time and be emotionally okay. It's just the two cannot coexist.
Recently, it seems like there's been an uptick or more effort put into understanding what we need mentally, emotionally, and maybe it's a generational thing, right? Because it was kind of taboo in our community when it came to our parents and grandparents. Why do you think there's been such a push to address mental health with this generation of people?
I absolutely agree with you that there is a generational difference in how we talk about mental health. I know in my own family, my grandparents would say, well, when we had these kinds of issues back in my day, you didn't see us falling out and carrying on. And they just had a different perspective. Whereas
No, they died
now, not
early though.
they did die earlier, and they didn't
Mhm.
have, and they had other kinds of issues, to be honest, to manage. Like, the challenges have evolved and they've changed, but we also see in our educational system, when we think about our K through 12 young people, there's more language related to anxiety and depression. There's more understanding of what it is. And when we do understand better, we can articulate, the problems. We can articulate
Mhm.
better what's going on for us. So I think that we see all of that happening for our younger individuals, but because there is the generational difference, when we see young folks struggling, we don't also see the requisite response, because older generations are saying, you're going to be okay, put some hair on your chest, like, you
Mhm.
can figure this out. And so I think we still see that strain and that struggle because of the differences in how individuals were socialized and how we've been raised over the years.
When I first reached out to a therapist back in, I want to say maybe 2013, and she asked me, what brings you here? That's always like the initial, question. Because sometimes you know, and sometimes you don't know. You're like, I just know I need to be here, sis. I don't know. And I'm sure you have clients like that too. Um, but I told her I had gone through so much when I got laid off in 2008, dealing with the racism of the city I was living in, and the corporation and blah blah blah, then losing everything in the recession. And then I moved to Oakland, and my life felt like it just changed like that. I was dating a man that I loved. I had gotten closer to my sisters. I had amazing girlfriends. The city is vibrant and it's black as you want to be, and I could just be my black self. You know what I mean? But suddenly I went from like drowning to doggy paddling to swimming. And I was like, this just doesn't feel right to be drowning and now swimming and not address the shift. And I guess my question to you is, how do we get people to understand that there is stress in surviving, there's stress in thriving, there's stress in the in between, and we got to work it out so that once we hit that space where we're thriving, we can do it in a healthy way.
It sounds like you had a tremendous amount of self-awareness and insight that a lot of people just don't have. And that's why conversations like this are important, so that when individuals are ready, then something can shift or something can click, because there are a lot of individuals who really are just stuck. And my heart goes
Mhm.
out to folks who just been doing the same thing, for years and just don't see a way out. And
Yeah.
until someone is ready to make change, and I'll tell anybody, if you're not ready for change, it's not going to happen. You can say, I'm going to eat right tomorrow, but if you're not ready, it's not going to happen. And so having information available to individuals, and I think this is what suffers a lot, especially in the African American community, is the information. There's so much, misinformation, straight up lies, and confusion about what
Yeah.
mental health is, that it's hard to make shifts because folks don't have the information just yet. But I know it's getting out there.
Yeah. And again, it's become a very popular topic, if you will. Uh, you know, Even our athletes have come out and they're like, no, I don't want to perform. I'm not going to perform. My mind and body are not in sync. My mental health is not okay. And I feel like that not only opens up the conversation, but leaves space for people who are watching them to also tap into what it is that they're thinking and feeling and discuss it and not be afraid of it.
Yes, and we need people who have visible platforms to do more of that. One of the things that we know in psychology is that people who are perceived to have power or wealth tend to be more influential. That's why we just respond to people who we see as celebrities, because that's just built into our
Mhm.
psyche. And so when we see individuals who are, presumably at the height of their game, pun intended, people who are at the height of their game and seem to be living their best lives, when they are able to say, I too am vulnerable, or I too have been vulnerable, somehow it does give permission for the rest of us, who may have been resistant before, to say, huh, well, if they can say that, if they can put themselves out there and make adjustments in the interest of their own well-being, then maybe I can do that too. Just maybe. And that's true for an individual who may never have thought about their mental health ever before in life.
Let's turn the corner here a little bit and talk more about suicide because it still is very much a taboo topic, especially in the Black community. Because there's this stigma, surrounding suicide and mental health, like it's a personal weakness, that you can't cope or you couldn't do it, couldn't make it. So, can you give some insight into what's really going on when someone has suicidal thoughts and actually goes through you know, with dying by suicide?
The interesting thing about saying that someone who has died by suicide was weak is that the reality is the opposite. That that person
Mm.
actually had the strength and the bravery to say, I'm going to go through, with my own strategy to end pain. Because that's essentially what people who are dying by suicide are doing. They're managing pain the best way that they can. For some individuals, the method or the strategy or whatever they use is lethal. We have a lot of suicide attempts in our society. There's about 30 attempts for every suicide death. We don't pay as much attention to those. And for some people, they end up hospitalized and they live. And for other people, they don't. And the attempt is fatal. But when we think about what it actually takes to even come up with a plan and to go through with something that is counter to what it means for our, like, humans are designed to live. We're always trying
Yeah.
to find ways to live and survive. And the capacity to be able to take one's own life actually suggests an incredible amount of strength and bravery.
Now, we're aware of the stats. They say that Black men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than Black women. And in your book, you talk about some powerful research on suicide by another's hands and how that connects to homicide amongst Black men. Can you elaborate a little more on that and share the warning signs?
Well, that's correct. One of the things that we do know is that Black men are more likely to die by suicide. Interestingly, Black women are more likely to attempt suicide. Black women are just are Black women are less likely to die by suicide because of less lethal means. But one of the things that I have wondered about, and there seems to be some preliminary research, is that Black men who may be feeling like their life doesn't matter, who may be feeling just, just disoriented about connecting with their own life and their own well-being, may somehow end up in a situation where someone else is more likely to take their life. Because recognizing that suicide is not really acceptable, even though the rates seem to be, or the rates are increasing in the Black community, suicide isn't perceived as acceptable. But if someone is in such overwhelming pain that they don't want to live, they may put themselves in some situation, some deadly or violent situation where someone else takes their life, and they're not motivated to be able to save themselves.
Wow. So does that stem from a space of feeling valued in society, feeling valued in the community?
It's probably safe to say that someone who does value their own life is going to be less likely to end up in a situation that is troubling, where they could die, where they lose control of the situation or circumstances.
And most times when we think about suicide, we think about drugs or a weapon. But there's also the space where a person can just give up on themselves and neglect their physical health as well. What's your take on that and that thought process? So a person just kind of shutting down and moving on.
Well, for my entire career, I have been focused on what are the ways that mental health and coping show up for Black people that may not be very well understood or not well discussed in the mainstream. And I think about, what suicide could look like, because based on the level of pain and trauma and untreated emotional disturbance that we see in the Black community, I would actually expect for suicide death rates to be even higher than they are. And so for me, recognizing, just like energy principles, like, so where could that energy be going? And one of the things that I do wonder about is, suicide or premature death that could happen by other means. So as an example, we know that diabetes is rampant in marginalized communities, including among Black communities, so much so that we're always talking about somebody's sugar. She got sugar.
She got the
we got
sugar.
nicknames. We would come up with a nickname for a serious health condition.
We do. And we laugh at some of the most ridiculous things.
We have jokes. We have
Case in
jokes about
point.
serious health problems.
I
What
know.
does it mean? When somebody got sugar,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they sending their nephew down the street to get Coca-Cola and cake
Yeah.
and snacks and all these things, and they're not managing it.
Yeah.
The thing about these serious health problems is that they are oftentimes accompanied by depression. People who have diabetes are 50% more likely to be depressed. And then we're asking depressed people to be able to manage their health and exercise and remember to take their medication. Is too much. And we need to be able to think about physical health problems in the way that they're connected to mental and emotional health problems, so that we can start to address these really very complex issues. I know we like to oversimplify things so that we can come up with easy solutions, but we need to really be able to think about the layers in a lot of these different kinds of challenges.
Well, while we're talking about layers, childhood trauma is a big one for most folks. How does childhood trauma factor into how we cope as adults?
The thing about childhood trauma that's interesting is that it affects so many different areas of our lives. And the research in the last 5 years, I would say, has been especially interesting with regard to how childhood trauma is related to physical health problems, emotional health problems, because it's not treated effectively. Again, well, it's not treated effectively. Young people don't have the cognitive capacity to deal with stressful things happening. And so we need to, most importantly, get support for young people, to give them the space to talk and manage whatever it is that happened for them and understand it from their perspective. Because two children could have the exact same experience, and one can walk away sufficiently okay, and the other one might not be. I mean, it's tough, because you especially for Black children trying to find the balance between knowing that racism is out there, it's in the schools. Children aren't immune from racism. They know what it is starting in first grade, and
Hmm.
managing that, and also trying to encourage them when they're like, I know that teacher treated me differently from that little boy that didn't look like me. Like, how do you manage that? And that's, I think that's one of the places where it starts for young people and parents trying to find spaces that affirm who our children are. And
Yeah.
we can't be casual about it and say, well, I was the only one in my classroom that looked like me and I was fine. Like, okay, that was great for you, it might not be good
Yeah.
for your daughter, for your son.
And are you really fine? Because you don't really know how you're showing up in the world, and that that kind of leads to my next question, Dr. Rita. So, because some folks find blackness to be a struggle, but you suggest that it's an asset to our survival. So, first of all, what is that about? How is it an asset to our survival?
There are a number of pots or buckets of research that are pretty consistent. And the idea of a positive African American ethnic identity or Black racial identity being protective in so many domains of life, like individuals who positively see themselves as Black do better in educational settings, do better in work settings, like you name it. I don't know what it is. I don't know what that magic is. But if you think about, some of our popular movies where the hero or heroine doesn't know who they are at the beginning of the movie, and at some point they figure out who they are, and then they're able to do these wonderful things because they are connected to who they are. When
Mm-hmm.
people of African descent are disconnected from Africanness, it's the same thing where you just disoriented, and you can't quite achieve what it is that you're supposed to be doing, whatever it is in life. And so when we have a positive sense of the people that I came from are resilient people who did supernatural things, and that is in me, it takes us a long way. The work is
Yeah.
consistent, the research is consistent.
Just be like, rah.
Go Simba, go.
Yes. But with that said, there's also some black people who don't know how to or don't feel comfortable connecting to black culture, especially like in the workplace and those types of things. Uh, so can you elaborate a little bit on how connecting to your blackness, especially as if you're of mixed race, can help you thrive?
It's complicated for individuals who identify as being of mixed race, in part because, especially if they show up in the world looking like someone who's of African descent, they're going to be treated as someone who's of African descent. And unfortunately, for a lot of our society, it's a liability. It honestly is, that people see an individual who's Black as threatening for whatever reason, or or they see them as threatening, like their life doesn't matter, that they don't make any contributions, they deserve to be silenced, or they deserve not to live. So I understand that aspect. It's important for that individual to be aware, though, of the things that they're telling themselves about being Black. Are they resistant to their Black identity? And this is one of those things that might be hard to be honest about. It might take writing some thoughts down rather than holding them in their mind or holding them in the head, because then things just go in circles. But it's really important to first be honest about what it means to be a person of African descent, especially given the messaging that we have in our society. And then saying, I reject that. And maybe I need to participate in some self education and really understanding, the history of people of African descent around the world.
A lot of people are scared of therapy, and it's not necessarily even the fact that they're scared to come in and open up. They're scared, because they're going to come talk to a stranger, or they say, I just can't find the right therapist. So how do we find the right therapist so we can get on the right path to healing and becoming whole?
That is a $1 million question, because the right therapist might take a little bit of time to actually find. And what I always suggest that individuals do, whether they start with their employee assistance program, which is a good place to start, or, Google one of the online directories, to first come up with a list of 3 to 5 individuals who look like they could be a good fit. The kinds of things that make a person a good fit, if they feel like the person has to be, Black, or they have to be a person of color, okay, great. There are some therapists who aren't people of color who are still really good therapists. If they say that they have expertise in a particular area. So if worry is your thing, then someone who says they work with individuals who have anxiety, great. If you're dealing with substance use, you want to make sure you're seeing someone who has expertise in that area. So these are all things that make someone a good fit. But then also there's just personality things. And that's why I say you have to make a list of 3 to 5, because you won't know personality until that first session, or until you talk to them on the phone and find out, whether or not they're comfortable seeing people of color. And we know when somebody hedges, when you ask them, what percentage of your clients would you say are Black women? And you hear that pause for about 2 seconds, you're like, okay, no, thank
Ooh,
you. And then
I
you move
never
on to the
thought
next person.
about
Yeah.
that.
Oh, yeah. You can ask people that.
Yeah. I mean, I never thought to ask. My therapists have been Black women, and I care to see older Black women because I'm like, I need some wisdom along with this knowledge that you're giving me. But okay, yeah, that's a good question, and I think asking questions prior to booking will probably help some of the ease some of the anxiety in going to talk to a stranger too. So,
Yes. And it's okay if, that first session, so not even just the phone conversation, but if you see them for one session, it's just like, ooh, this just doesn't feel good, then it's okay. That's why I said make a list of 3 to 5, because if you have a list of one and you put all your marbles in that basket and it doesn't work out, then a lot of folks are just like, oh, well, therapy doesn't work. And therapy does work as long as it's a good fit. And the individual is ready for change. I would say overwhelmingly, we see folks come through who aren't, they want to be better, right? So they're struggling emotionally. They want things to be better, but they're not willing or ready to make the changes to get to where they want to be. And that's really hard. And it's okay to say, I'm not ready to change yet. It really is okay.
yeah, that's another gut check though, to actually have to verbalize that you're not ready to change. All right, we just gonna go ahead and end on that note. Dr. Rheeda Walker, thank you so much. Your book, The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health, we purchased it on Amazon. I know it's in bookstores and online. It is a gem. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your wisdom, your knowledge, and for this book. And with that, we are ending season 2 of Girl, We Need to Talk. You got your glass? There's tea in here. I know we don't do mental health and liquor.
I got my plastic cup.
Hey, that works. Look at the good doctor over here with the plastic cup. I'm not mad. Bad and bougie. Oh, goodness. Cheers to growing through our grief and to being happy, healthy, and whole. Cheers. Well, that's a wrap on season 2 of Girl, We Need to Talk. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sharing the videos. Thanks for sharing your stories and for rocking with us. Clearly, grief is something that we all go through. It's not pretty. It's not fun. But we can grow through it, as you heard from each and every one of our guests in season 2. It's going to be okay. I can't tell you when, how, or why you're even going through what you're going through, but it's going to be okay. And we're going to be all right together. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I am Miss Charity Bailey on all platforms, including YouTube. And until next time, cheers to being happy, healthy, and whole.